I sent the meetings and minutes. And
Yes, I received the
And
minutes.
I printed out the wrong ones, just like I sent the wrong ones. So, um,
Yeah, but you got the right one the second time.
yeah. So, I, minutes, anybody want to approve the minutes? Second, approved.
Aye.
The meeting schedule, I think it's agreed, and nobody wants to change it. Okay, leave it at that. Leave as is then. And one last update on beavers. I did check with Spring Valley Nature Center where they had beavers back in the 90s or whatever, and they let them stay because they were in an area that was, he said they hung around, they were there for about a year and then they moved on. In his experience over the last, he's been the conservation guy there for some 30 years, says they show up periodically, they stick around for years or so, and then they move on.
Okay.
They're not long-term residents anywhere that he's ever noticed. So, if they ever come back again. Creek cleanup event. Did you have a chance to meet with Mark?
I have not met with Mark, and I apologize for that. I did reach out to him, and we just haven't set a date. Give him some of the topics that we were looking to discuss so that he could prepare for them. And that's as far as we had made it. I will certainly make sure that I do it before the February. I think that we're both a little bit in snow plowing mode, I think.
Yeah, busy
You know, but certainly it's never too early to start to plan. And the other thing I think related to this that we also have learned since then is that McDonald Creek, or excuse me, Prospect Heights has awarded a new garbage contractor.
I just saw
Right.
And so certainly that was something that we had talked about briefly at previous meetings, but we didn't know any of the details. Now that we know the details, from what I know at this point, the landscape portion of the contract stayed the same as it was previously, so we can still operate, at least under the assumption at this point until I talk to Mark, that yard waste that's small enough to be put out and picked up by the garbage hauler would be picked up, and that'll allow Mark and our public works crew to really focus on the bigger logs and things that a homeowner otherwise wouldn't be able to cut up small enough to put out for their landscape waste contractor or garbage contractor.
Do we know if it's going to stay Fridays?
I believe so. I haven't heard anything otherwise, but I didn't ask that specific question, I guess.
What's that?
It's Flood Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But if last time we had talked about doing it for a whole week, so I guess really shouldn't matter since we're doing it for a full week, whether it's a Monday pickup or a Wednesday pickup. I think either way a resident can.
Yeah, I think when I read it, it
accommodate
was
that as it relates
stay
to
as a
cleanup.
Friday pickup. I didn't realize the entire city's done on just a Friday, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
becoming more and more common. You know, because there's really 4 garbage haulers for 252 suburbs that we have here in Chicago that, for the most part, they pick a day and they do one community one day and another community another day. Some communities still do multiple pickups, but that's becoming more common.
Did you mention the dates? You said you briefly left a message or something?
Sent him an email
Okay.
and left him a message.
So he's aware of
Yeah.
this proposed, okay.
Right. And I think the unknown is still obviously snow. I know last year we got snow in the last week of
Yeah.
April. So certainly, if that happens, I think we just have to anticipate a kind of a week later or, this would have to get pushed back. At the end of the day, I think the expectation from residents is that, the roads are still going to be plowed and all the other work that's life safety related is done first, if I can say it that way.
Right, right. So I did propose, a mock-up of a flyer. What do you think? It's just a draft.
I think that one, from the brochure, we had the graphic that kind of showed the cut zone of the creek, if you will. that might not be a bad thing to include, unless we just include the brochure as well
We could
with
do that
this.
again.
You know, it never hurts to put it back in front of residents. Was your thought to mail this?
Well, it depends on, well, after our previous experience with distributing, I guess so.
Mailing seems to make the most sense. There's a cost involved, but, you know, if that's the cost of getting improvements, then that's the cost of getting improvements. It's a small cost in the grand scheme of things, especially if we're asking residents to do this themselves. You know, paying a little bit of money to ask our residents to step up and volunteer to do something, I think is money well spent.
Do you want to, make it, like, include this in, or another back sheet that's more specific? Or are we targeting just one,
One
just
area.
your neighborhood for starters?
Well, I was gonna ask that question.
And that,
Are we gonna do it by area like we used to do?
That's
Uh,
kind of.
Or are we talking the
the
entire?
city at one time? You know, I think that's something, I apologize that I don't have that answer. I guess that was one of the things that Mark was gonna help us to answer. You know, I still think that it's doable for the entire community at one time. If I remember right, there was about 100 people.
Yes.
You know, on that, and we had talked on the last meeting, we talked about,
Well,
participation rates.
you-
You know, if we get 25% participation rate, we're probably doing pretty well. If we get 50 would be certainly better, and 100 would be great, but, so at 25% of 100, you're only talking 25 property owners, and if most of the stuff is small enough stuff that the garbage company can pick it up, then, so
Right.
I still think, and hoping that we can do the entire city at one time. That way, we don't have to worry about sections and so forth.
Yeah, because on your brochure, I'm looking, it says April 21 through 28. And then on your thing, it says on Mondays, April 22nd and 28th.
Oh, no, it should be 29th. Yeah, it should be 20.
But in other
Then
words,
again, this is a drag, I don't
yeah,
know where-
well, it's.
Right. So that date is an easy date
So
that we
this
can
is Sunday
change.
through Sunday.
Oh,
So-
okay.
So it's 2 weekends, sort of 2 weekends, kind of. We should probably.
Yeah, we should probably give them the
Saturdays
2
and
full
Saturdays.
weekends. I would give them the 2 full weekends, so you're talking, what is that, a 9-day
We
period?
should probably make it April 20th.
Through the 28th.
Like, so Saturday through the 2 weekends.
Right. And I think we could certainly highlight, I don't know what the actual date of Earth Day is, but, I mean, that
It's
was the.
right around
Like
That,
22nd
you
or
know, I
something.
think we put that in this letter somewhere, that in celebration of Earth Day this year, we're starting this spring cleanup, so highlighting why we're doing that, significant, why this, with these 2 weekends are significant. Otherwise, a person might look at it and say, well, May sounds better for me, but if everybody, if it's a community-wide thing, we're doing it for out of our community cleanup for Earth Day, I think that's my thought, at least.
The other thing is, are we offering to, if you did it by neighborhood, we could kind of offer to spearhead it, be there at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning with some litter picker uppers and garbage bags and gloves and maybe some loppers and assist a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I think we should try and do the whole 100 houses at one time, because I agree with John, it's like how many people participate, but I think it's conceivably we could go, if that's knowing where all the houses are, we could just kind of just walk that area a little bit maybe or something.
Yeah, we
And
could
if somebody
divide it.
needs, and if somebody needs help, yeah, offer to help, because if we don't want to help, that doesn't speak very highly of us, I don't think.
I have, I don't know, about 6, trash grabbers and, I don't know, some loppers if you wanna. Maybe we just split up and take,
Big sections.
and just have somebody there with a few tools and,
Well,
maybe a thing of.
the other thing
coffee.
the other thing that comes to mind is there any landscaper or someone who has a crew that homeowners that are getting older, can hire at a reasonable, in other words, it would be like a
Right.
select crew that the public works would either work with or train, or, say, okay, this is the outfit that we recommend you, that, hire to trim the vegetation and clean up the creek banks across your property.
Could ask, although that they're usually pretty darn busy that time of year, aren't they?
Well, I mean, my thought on it is that, quite, speaking personally, I know there's a couple of landscapers that live in my neighborhood and, do a lot of work in Prospect Heights and I'm sure surrounding areas. I think ideally we'd ask the city to help with that and just say, who's got a business license for landscaping? We send them a letter and say, look, we're looking for one local,
Right.
property owner and, landscaping company that's wanting to do this and,
Or it might even be one of the tree, people that take down trees and stuff might,
right.
might be the ones to work on it.
Do we ask them first if they'll participate by, parking a truck in the neighborhood and offering help to anybody who wants help?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a great, that would be a great start, I think, for why a business would do it. I mean, I think it certainly, it might start as a creek cleanup, but then later in the fall, when I suddenly decide I want to trim my trees or plant trees or redo my landscaping, I already have a relationship with the landscaper that I otherwise wouldn't have had or so. So, I mean, I think that it can be a win-win situation for the local business and for the property owner if it's structured that way, as opposed to, just allowing or encouraging homeowners to go and find a landscaper on their own. Or,
Yeah, because,
We ask them to
at some
just-
point when we identify critical areas that we have, we may need to hire out, on behalf of the city, to go in these critical areas and do some work. To rely strictly on getting grants may not work, or it takes years and years, which doesn't solve our problems, especially in some areas.
Okay, or you could ask them just to put in 2 hours on Saturday, 2 hours, maybe one each, donate 2 hours a time, park their truck in the neighborhood, and you could get up 6 guys, and 2 hours on Saturday, another guy 2 hours on Sunday, and tell them in their flyer that they will be there to assist
Right.
with big stuff, but they're not gonna do it for you,
Right.
just as volunteers. I don't know if they'll go for that.
the landscaper.
Yeah. It's a
I mean, like
busy
I said,
time of year.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think, I think there's a profit motive in there that could be encouraged, that.
Absolutely.
Certainly
I
a
mean,
little bit of volunteer would pay returns if, it's presented in the right way. And so that would be the position that I think that, at least an approach to take. You're building a long-term relationship with a property owner.
yes.
It's brand recognition, it's whatever you want to call it. But certainly if, it's such and such landscaping, whether it's, I'm trying to even think of a name of one, but, if they're there in the neighborhood and like I said, a homeowner will think of a lot of other projects that probably need to be done as well, so.
Mhm.
That's why I think the landscaper may be willing to volunteer 2 hours.
If you put a limit on it.
Right.
And tell them that, they're not doing it for them, they're helping with big stuff. All right, so who in the city handles licensing?
Probably Peter is the person I would ask.
Okay,
The clerk probably handles it, but he would be the staff person that would have access to the data and be able to help us with it.
okay, that's, have to get that out.
The next few weeks.
Yeah, I would say if we send this, it should go out like the 15th.
This should go out by March 15th.
Yeah,
Or-
right after taxes are, as soon as somebody has that off their mind, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Too far ahead and they,
Okay.
it'll get lost. Okay, I'll see what I can do about landscapers and for the whole city, and maybe spread ourselves around a little bit and possibly put a note in that we will, so, you know.
So John, you're gonna still meet with,
I'll try to meet with Mark in the next, by the end of this week or beginning of next.
okay, yeah, and you might ask him also about landscapers and,
Right.
or the tree guys, if, what would work, what he thinks would be an amenity to his crew.
You mean pounding a nail or wrapping a piece of wire around it, hoping the scrappers would, the metal scrappers would pick it up is not enough?
Right.
Who does that? Okay, I will see what else we know, can dig up and revise by next week.
Okay, did we want to change the meeting time for half an hour later, or?
Everybody seems to agree to stick at 6 o'clock, so.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that, I'm flexible, doesn't,
Clean up,
I'm reading your notes, Todd.
Oh, okay. It becomes interesting.
Well, the city has, has something on the FEMA floodplain in their news.
Yeah, because when I was looking at that, because, like I said, I
This
received
is
the,
their winter 2019.
yeah, but I got an e-note from a woman, asking about where to find information on a house, on a piece of property. And obviously, yeah, she had no clue as to where to go, and the property was located in Mount Prospect. So I gave her, okay, you can look in the FEMA map, see this, and then look at the ordinances, so on and so forth. And it's kind of information that somehow, and then that reminded me of the FEMA map, and when if somebody watching us on our meeting, on the web, we don't mention, FEMA and the map, so where they can go look to see, is my property in the floodplain, is it out of the floodplain? And you can see all of that for nothing. So when I'm saying next time we decide to either update or change our brochure, it's good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with our brochure. It's just that one little piece of information to direct people where they should go and be able to start to educate themselves on the environment that they're living in. And the other issue I was thinking about when we're talking floodplain and maps is the understanding of what's happened over the years when they started passing detention requirements, as they started building, and the effect it's had. And when we talk to people and they say, the creek, the levels jump up real quick now, they never used to do that. And we're not explaining to why these conditions are happening, because in essence, they are normal. This is something that is a result of, as we've continued to build our community and put in detention, we've gathered water efficiently. So in the lesser storms, we're gathering it quickly and releasing it at a 3-year storm rate. That's the outlet that's sized for when you get a 100-year storm. So anything less than a 3-year storm, we're seeing actually greater runoffs than we used to when it was in grass or farmland in the original. Right. So this is why people are seeing the jump up quicker than they used to.
They call it flashing.
Right. And we need to educate, and that's where I get into where we used to have people located along the creek, all the way down. We should, if we could just monitor the rise and fall, the quick, and eventually develop a chart that has rainfall, elevations, and duration of the rain. In other words, did I get an inch in an hour, 2 hours, half hour? What effect it has. And if we can establish that baseline and have that reporting, anytime we start to have obstructions of any sort, we'll see a change in that data.
Well, what's the baseline?
The
So that's
baseline
it.
would have to be monitored and determined after some period of time.
Right, it would be something that you would develop over a period of years to educate ourselves and give us a better handle. This is what's gonna happen, guys, you better be ready for it. Because 2 hours later, here's what you expect.
Right.
So you're talking about taking creek depth measurements, depth, and you want doing flow too? Flow measurements?
Well, basically, if we could just probably do it right at each bridge or area, and then, say, okay, we've just had, half inch of rain. The creek, after the rain stopped, it's an hour later, 2 hours, however we would establish a criteria or a formula. We'd probably have to talk to some engineers that would know how you would,
Well, I've measured flow, but
Yeah.
I don't, Sierra Club has a H2O Sentinels section, that does water tests, things like that. But they just do basic, they monitor for sodium, phosphorus,
right, any pollution.
porosity, just basics, not heavy duty. But they've been focused on Salt Creek, but I might be able to get a testing kit, and as far as depth, that's a yardstick.
I would think that there's an automated way to do this, that, I have never seen the geological, the National Geological Services gauge that's underneath Camp McDonald.
Right,
But I
right.
would imagine that there's a flow kit that you could buy, and I would think there's, we could probably, one of the things that we could, strive to do is look for grant funding for those types of, professional, equipment, because, the human reliability is always gonna be a problem.
Yes.
And continuity and how a different person measures it differently, whether they push it into the mud 3 inches or they hold it, an inch above the sand, for example, can have a significant impact. So if we can, get a monitoring thing.
Because when I look at Lake Arlington and its outfall,
Yeah.
okay, the effect that has on the downstream properties from that point. Because prior to Lake Arlington, all of that water from the north and south wide together and then came through Country Gardens area. Lake Arlington then bypassed most of the, commercial part along Arlington Heights Road, Palatine Road, goes into Lake Arlington.
Right.
And then meets back up with the creek. So you're really putting it back together again, downstream of Glenbrook, going under Palatine
Yeah, it's
Road.
very shallow and slow-moving.
Right.
Just north of where the outflow comes in, and then it gets wide and fast and deep. But
So, and that's basically almost where the beavers are camping
they,
out.
they were down further, but.
Right.
So have you ever found the start? Is the start underground somewhere? Have they buried the start of this creek?
I honestly don't know.
But where it starts?
Yeah,
It's
where's the
sort of,
headwater?
it sort of starts, behind what used to be a Jewish community center at our old Arlington Heights Road and Arlington Heights Road there, coming up Arlington Heights Road, and college and university
Yeah.
come in, and then there's a little wetland right
Okay.
by that Jewish community center. That's sort of the start of it, but then it might go under, it might be piped
Piped
to the
under.
Oh, yeah,
industrial
yeah.
park.
Supposedly the
Supposedly it
drainage-
starts a little closer to 53. But I can't, it's not visible beyond that small
It's
wetland.
like Lake Cook and 53 is basically where the start of the one branch starts.
But it's not visible there at all.
Right, but that's what eventually ends up coming through
So,
our area
All the
here.
all the storm pipes all
All
come
the storm
somewhere.
pipe, right. And then the other spur of it is what goes across Palatine Road, up in Arlington Heights, Palatine, all that shopping center and everything that's in
Yeah, it
there.
just dies under the shopping center.
Right,
Disappears again, it gets piped. It goes past the animal hospital a little bit there, and then into the parking lot area, and then just disappears under a pipe. Never to be seen again.
Well, it comes out of the pipe on the other side, probably with a lot more water than what
But
went
so-
in
so
on
the-
one end.
The true source of it, we have not found, you know, or is not visible, as far as I know. We can hook up with, I mean, if you want to, if you're interested in other water quality at all, there's a River Watch network that does the macroinvertebrates to check for water quality. You can, there's another group, Turbid, Illinois, that was just doing turbidity and velocity. There's a lot of places to send data to if you want to start collecting. Other than that, was there, you mentioned data in your thing, which other stream, you're just talking about the
yeah, my biggest,
velocity and volume?
yeah, my biggest concern is that when you look at over the years, since 1970, with the detention and the engineering that goes in and says, this is the 100-year floodplain. That's all predicated on a certain size, certain elevation, certain slopes. That's, the engineering's been done. Now, when we start to add in vegetation or anything that's gonna change the dynamics or the width of the creek, the sedimentation, will basically make that engineering
Actually,
not valid
all
anymore.
that engineering's out the window because of the nature of the
Right.
storms.
And the only way that we can assure our residents and the city and what we do is to make sure that the creek maintains its size and capacity. Because 85% of all of our drainage in the city has to end up in the creek and move to the displays.
But the way to do that is to cut back on how much drains into the creek, because the.
That's almost impossible
No, it's
because-
not impossible. There's a dozen different ways people can.
The only thing that we have left as far as that's not built, we're almost 100%,
Yeah, but we don't have to direct all that into the creek. We can cut back significantly if we stop dumping everything into the swales.
but you have to store it somewhere. Where are you gonna store
On
it?
your own property. Each got a half acre that can stay wet for a day. If people stop pumping their sump pumps into the swales and draining their gutters into the swales, that's a lot of water.
Well, I mean, that all brings up the possibility of the existing detention ponds. Is there any possibility of enlarging them, to increase their capacity?
It's,
I think what I mean, you're talking two different, you're talking the micro and the macro
Right.
model of this. I guess the micro thing would say that each person tries to focus on individual detention on their property, which it would be rain barrels and swales and small scale stuff, permeable pavement and you know, perhaps building a small 1-foot berm around their property to hold water for, you know, 12 hours, 24 hours after the rain. And the macro model is for the city to basically look at strategic wetland areas or strategic detention ponds now as they exist and expand them to take in the.
one of the big differences is the one costs next to nothing, and the other is telling the city, pay for this. It's gonna cost a lot, and we wanna pay for it. And I don't think most people in the city do. So that's why I think the direction should be to encourage people to do the practically free things.
Well, we encourage that anyway. I mean, anything we do is to try to get the homeowner that lives along the creek or has it on his property to do as much as they can to preserve the capacity of that creek. Outside of that,
But it's not
There's
up
a-
to every homeowner, they're just
no,
those
no, I
homeowners. Everybody
understand
else
it, right,
should be
but like I
contributing.
said, that 85% of all of our drainage ends up in the creek.
So
so
we should
even
cut
though-
that back to 75%.
The only way you can do that is if you have more detention.
No,
Part of the original problem with detention and the detention ordinance and the capture a 100-year flood and release it at a 3-year storm rate didn't take into consideration, I'm going to do property A, which is located on the northern part of the creek. So this property, I'm collecting it, I'm dumping it at a 3-year rate. I now develop the next property and the next one and the next one down. Everybody gets to dump it at the 3-year rate versus here's what the flow is going to do. So you have to hold yours and release it in a different timing or different size detention pond so that the flows don't accumulate. And part of our problem over the years has been that, yes, we're saving and detaining more water than we ever used to. But the way we release it in combination together, without looking at the overall flow of water, has created problems. And that's where the size of the channel, keeping it clean, becomes very important.
well, the channel originally was much wider.
No,
We've narrowed it.
no. I used to be able to jump across the creek. It was maybe 3 feet across.
But when in a high flow after a storm, it would have spread out to be 8 feet wide.
More than
Shallow,
that.
but wide.
But now,
But
now
now we've
that,
channelized it, so it has no place to go. There's no floodplain with it anymore, except down where the beavers were. There's no floodplain.
Right.
all I can tell you is my creek now is twice as wide as it was.
And twice as
and
deep.
And it's, yeah, it's deep and it flows.
But the thing is, it's not supposed to be that deep. It's not supposed to be,
No, but you gotta remember, it used to be farmland. When they built the subdivision, they put, it's a ditch, not a creek.
right.
Because it was, it was like your culvert out front. That's how small it was, as far as water going by. Once all this development started, without any detention requirements,
Right.
it increased until we said, okay, that's it. We're gonna stop, put detention requirements for any new building to keep the amount of flooding that's existing the same, so it doesn't increase. And as long as it doesn't increase, now we can engineer our way out of it, or maintain that's what it's going to be.
Okay, but Cherry Creek and all that whole development there, where's there's no detention over there that I can think of? That whole Periwinkle, Woodview, Cherry Creek, that whole section. Is there any detention?
I'm not sure on Cherry Creek, although when that got built, with Lake Arlington coming online, that, I'd have to look back at the floodplain maps.
Well, I think, at the end of the day, we can't fix the sins of the past other than, moving forward, try to change and have better regulations. The good news is you can really do both the micro and the macro at the
Yes,
same time.
yes.
A little bit what you missed the last time, Hart, is we had talked, at the last meeting, we talked about incentives that the city could provide for green infrastructure, essentially. And so that's kind of what I think Kathy's talking about is,
Oh,
if people
absolutely.
were incentivized to do permeable driveways, maybe even given a $100 credit for a drainage swale, rain garden or whatever, those types of things, that they would perhaps do more of that, which would reduce the flow, and then certainly looking at additional capacity. I think the good news out of all of this is that, I think this group and the recent activities over the last few years have brought flooding and stormwater to the forefront of the discussion, for the elected officials. And certainly, I did have the opportunity to watch a little bit of the the debate or the interviews with the two mayoral candidates for April, and that was one of the biggest takeaways was stormwater flooding is
Yes.
a big issue. So at least if we can, keep that momentum going, then certainly, there's opportunities for corrections in the future. I know it doesn't get entirely to water quality and some of the other more desirable benefits from the creek. It at least is a step forward, recognizing that the McDonald Creek is an important part of our infrastructure. So, I mean, that's a positive thing, and so I think if we keep, pushing that issue, some of the other benefits will come along with it, or we can certainly work them into
Right.
Other projects and so forth. And it's beyond the local level as well. I know that one of the reasons that the city discussed for pursuing home rule was to be able to use some of the money for stormwater projects. I know at the state level right now, there is a new bill that's been proposed under this legislation that will basically give non-home rule communities like Prospect Heights the ability to collect stormwater fees and pay for stormwater projects, which is one of the reasons why they were pursuing it. So, there's a good possibility that, perhaps Springfield will fix the problem, for the city, and they'll have more tools, if I can say it that way, to be able to address these issues. So, obviously, time will tell where that goes, but at least it's a proposal that's being considered now, that, hopefully the city, the Prospect Heights, the administrator, whoever is advocating for it, so
Yes.
certainly recognizing that they support that cause, if that is why we were pursuing that. So, similarly, I know that, that we have a new governor that was sworn in recently, and he released his first budget proposal last week. And, infrastructure is a part of that. This next, to finish this year, I don't think we'll see any movement on that front. But certainly there's talk of a capital bill. There's been movement about looking for shovel-ready projects, if I can say it that way, because there will be some revenue coming. I think what we can help do, for the city is to help identify some of those, very specific projects. At the end of the day, saying that the entire creek needs some attention and needs cleanup is not really good enough. I mean, it's looking at specific problematic areas, whether it's stuff that you have from your historical knowledge, heart, or other things that, come in from residents. If we can identify very specific issues and put those, to the Public Works Director and to the city staff, then they can, funnel those along to the Springfield politicians that are looking for projects to fund so that they can spend this infrastructure money, because that's the way it typically goes, is they want projects that are easy to tackle in a short time frame so that they can show progress. So, those are all opportunities, if I can say it that way, that are coming. But one of the things I did hear in Mayor Helmer's somewhere in his writings, whether it was for his campaign or for his current job as the mayor, is that the city has identified 20 projects, 20 flooding projects, from what I understood, that are problematic. They've prioritized the top 5, and then the one meeting that we were here, Kathy and I, to do the presentation, they were talking about funding the first project. So, they are, his goal at least seems to be to try to chip away at that list of 20. That particular project is out west of 12, I believe.
And it will dump more water into the creek.
It'll dump more water in the creek, and where I was going with that is that they have the unique opportunity to use TIF money and a few other things like that to help it because of geographically where it's located. But he did recognize that the other 4 projects, they don't have funding for. And so, at the end of the day, we have to moderate or balance what we're talking about. We can identify projects and problems, but we also have to recognize the city knows about enough problems right now that they don't have funding for, that, it's not like if we identify a problem tomorrow that we're gonna see it dealt with this year,
Now,
next year.
have you seen the list?
I have not personally seen the list, and
It's
that's
the same
something.
as the old one. It's pretty much the same as the one you had, gave me from the 1990s.
So we've made no progress since the 90s.
Because we've built more, and we've cemented more, and we have piped more, and
Yeah,
we've
because
done nothing
I
to
guess
cut down on the
My
amount of
question
water
would have been
going.
on the list is, not having it burned in my brain, is the priority of it.
Right.
You know, they might be looking at something that might not cost much, it's easy,
Yeah.
but it might be number 5 on the list.
Right. Yes, I don't know that, and yes, certainly, if I was in that position, I'd like to tackle the low-hanging fruit first. That's always the
The easiest one to
strategy.
pick, right?
Right, and especially if it's low cost,
Right.
If you can knock off 3 or 4 of them that way, then you're only stuck with the 14 that have this exorbitant cost that, you have no money to fix, I think what we can do is, to continue to advocate for stormwater, and hopefully, it'll get the attention in the budget process and get the funding that it needs to really start to make some progress. And I do think that we can do more to develop that concept of incentivizing individual homeowners to do some of this
Yeah.
themselves, because, recognizing we are a mostly fully developed community, and that means that we're gonna have to go back to the existing homeowners and say, these are things that you can do. Certainly, I'm not advocating for requirements, especially if they come at a cost, but if you can, incentivize it to do it, and then you could certainly reasonably make it a requirement for new construction as well, the same way that they're talking now, new construction requires a sprinkler system.
Yes.
To build it in Prospect Heights, and you can argue about that, but, at the end of the day, to say that you've got to hold the water from your lot as well for a 12-hour, 24-hour time frame doesn't seem unreasonable either, if you put it in
We
that
have
context.
big yards, you say your drain, your downspouts just have to drain onto your property, not into a swale. That's a simple thing that doesn't really impact, it's not gonna flood your house or.
Right.
Right. I mean, I will go through the neighborhood and you see everybody's pipes coming out, and all the sumps are kicking out into the swales too. Beyond which, as you're draining all this water off your property, the water for your well comes from that aquifer beneath your property. We're sending it all our water downstream, and then we go out and water our lawns. It just
Right.
makes no sense.
It's a convenience thing. At the end of the day, rain barrels are good, but they're not exactly convenient either, so
No,
they're-
but
it's a
you don't
balancing
even have
act.
to do that. You just have to let your grass soak up, or let
Right.
whatever you've got planted on your property soak up the water.
Right,
What will be interesting is to see since we haven't done this in many years, is how well the community responds to this cleanup. And it would be nice if we can kind of find out those that do react to it, and kind of reach out to those that, actually make an effort. Because at this point, it's, I don't know if anybody has gone on our website or, texted or called. So, it's hard to say where the interest of the community is when it comes to this issue, and as far as McDonald Creek goes. Be nice if we could find out, and we're trying to encourage that. And hopefully, with the cleanup, we'll get a bigger response, and maybe be able to get more people to monitor and, be our eyes on the creek and to what's going on.
Can everybody commit to, spending one morning of that this week, one Saturday or Sunday morning in a neighborhood, kind of
yeah,
just talking,
sure.
bringing?
Yep. But I think,
Don't have to be all 4 days, just one.
absolutely. I think the before and after photos was kind of our attempt to try to get some community
Right.
Pride out of it. if
Yes,
can
I
say it that
kind of
way.
like that issue.
I think that's once we get some photos that we can then kind of promote on social media and things like that, then hopefully that will build the enthusiasm for other peoples that didn't participate in the first one to say, well, maybe I'm gonna do it the next time or whatever, and perhaps if it goes over very well, and we feel it warranted, we could potentially go for another one in the fall, and just, all that, I think we can kind of see as it goes, and that way, if we get a 25% participation rate in the first one, maybe we can get a bigger one in a fall cleanup, and then, really, and I will say that, one of the things that they talked about, Prospect Heights demographics are changing, there is a younger generation like myself, I guess, that's moving in and coming in, and there's good and bad with that. I think, without oversimplifying, the good news is that, we're younger and have a little more physical ability to be able to go down and do some of these things. The downside is that don't really understand the importance of it necessarily as well. And so if we can help to get that information out there, why it's important, and yes, it can be an exciting thing to do, yourself or with your kids or whatever, that type of
Yes.
thing is, has a lot of potential for sure.
I'm just thinking gotta check that last weekend, they might have that race, that 5K race that they have in the neighborhood. That Backbones race, I think that's always that last weekend of April.
I'm not sure when they do
It
it.
runs through Country Gardens,
It's
and
like
and they set up right there at the playground, so,
Okay.
just as a logistics thing. Although we should be done by. Okay, well, anything else?
No, let's see, what was the meeting schedule's gonna be?
We were gonna do every other month, but
Okay.
if we're going to put this together, we probably
April.
need to meet next month
Okay, that's fine.
as well. So, anybody have a date? Calendar?
'26th.
Another March again?
Yeah.
26th, okay. Are you on spring break or something there? Your kids are too little.
Yeah, no, my kids are too little.
All right.
They're in the Park District programs, so.
Okay.
All right,
All right.
Rick, anything you think we should do on this, or?
No, I just,
And we'll revise this brochure, get some money for stamps. or
Yeah, I
envelopes.
saw in your minutes that you talked about getting a budget to Joe
Yeah.
Wade.
Yeah, but
Do you know
what are
what
we
his,
budgeting for?
do you know what his expectation for that is? Is that just a number?
He hasn't asked for one.
I
This
see.
was your
Oh, I
comment.
see, I see.
You mentioned
I
that
see.
budgets go in by
Uh,
then.
Right, so I mean, I think it would be nice to at least put a number out there that we would like to be able to, have a placeholder for specifics, but, one of the things we're talking about now is mailing costs and letter printing, so, I think minimally starting with, $500 to say we'd like $500 available for, promotional
Yes.
materials or educating materials, whatever you want to call it, I think is at least, the first thing that jumps to my mind. If there's other things that anybody else has, then we would just add on top of that, if I can say it that way, but,
And for the few things we've asked for in the past, they just stamped envelope, they ran envelopes through their postage
Right.
meters, so they didn't give us money for.
right, yeah, I wouldn't
And when
expect.
printing, he just paid for it themselves, he didn't,
Right, I just think
reimburse or
if
give
he can
me-
put $500 in his budget, whether it's in administration, whether it's in public works, whether it's in a McDonald Creek or a committee, I'm not sure how the groups that have the costs, where that money comes from, but I'm sure now it's coming out of somebody else's, it's coming from somebody else, and so it'd be nice to put,
From general city.
well, I mean, every dollar
Administration, I guess.
is budgeted for to go to something, in theory, when the year starts, and so,
Okay,
yeah, so.
okay,
I think he would appreciate having that request, going into the year.
and he had previously said in this committee, we had no budget.
Well, something
Do what you
$500,
can, we have no budget,
seems
you got no
reasonable.
authority. See what you can do.
No, and, you know, certainly the way that I would present it would very much be the way that I stated it earlier, is that, you know, to spend $500 or a little bit of money to ask our residents to do a little more volunteering, certainly compounds and multiplies that $500. If the city was to take on this, you know, the creek responsibility or cleanup itself, it would be the tune of 500,000. So, you know, it's a small investment.
Yes.
To build some communities, support for volunteerism and, responsibility.
Okay. Will do.
Okay, I have nothing else.
Rick,
I'm good.
okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Adjourned. We are adjourned.